Hello friends, in this video I'll present to you the case study of startup called Purple Squirrel. We will understand why Purple Squirrel failed. So let's dive in. Purple Squirrel started in year 2013. Let's understand what the startup was exactly doing. So in India we have a very genuine problem. The problem is that students get only theoretical knowledge in college. They only get theory and study for exams and their scores because that is what gets them placement in a country like India. Because the education system is poor, and so students don't get real life corporate experience. So the problem here is the problem of expectation. The expectation that company has from its employees and the skill level of the employees. There is a huge difference between that. So students getting theoretical knowledge is the problem, and the corporate companies, the huge companies, getting low quality talent is the problem. So Purple Squirrel was exactly bridging this problem, solving this problem. Now, how did it solve? So Purple Squirrel tied up with companies and corporates and also tied up with colleges. And it organized industrial visits for the college students for to the companies. Basically, suppose a student is studying mechanical engineering in the college. So alongside his degree, he was allowed to visit on industrial tours to the companies who had job related to mechanical engineering. This way, student acquired skills, gained practical knowledge, and understood what his work exactly was like. This made students prepared for better. And companies were very happy to hire from Purple Squirrel because they got a good talent as compared to a mere fresher. So let's now have a look at business model of Purple Squirrel. So Purple Squirrel charged for tour and workshop fees from the students. It's obvious, right? Since students were getting exposure to the real industries, to the real corporate companies, obviously they had to pay a price for it, which was a minimal price. Students could afford that. So that is how Purple Squirrel earned. The second source of revenue was taking hiring fees from the companies after the student was placed. Now you may ask that why would a company pay to hire? They have the HRs to get the top talent, right? Yeah, true. But the fact is, if a student has, say, 3 months or 6 months of industrial expertise, it is a lot of better choice, to rely on these startups compared to HRs. There is no guarantee that the talent that HR will hire will be good or not. But in case of Purple Squirrel, they ensure the overall development of child. They provided long workshops which lasted for 2 weeks, or some workshops were 4 weeks or 6 weeks long, and they also had more programs. Basically, the programs were designed such that the practical knowledge that they got on industrial visits was in line with the theoretical knowledge they got, so that they could apply the theory practically. This is how the programs were decided. So the problem was genuine. They were solving the problem beautifully. Later on, they tied up with 350 plus corporate companies so that they could hire the talent from them. Purple Squirrel made revenue of 3 crore and had a profit margin of 20%. Now look, this is something interesting. This is one of the rare case studies of our course where the startup is profitable. We have seen most startups were loss making, but here there is something different. So they were doing good. They tied up with the corporates, also tied up with colleges to get in students, and that is how they work beautifully. Since they made good revenue, they got funding of $2.5 million from Matrix Partners, which is again a leading investor in India. So everything was going great till this point. Now, what happens is, after funding of $2.5 million, investors gave them a sales target of 30 crore, which was to be achieved in next 2 years. So basically, since now they had an investor on board, which was a venture capital firm that is Matrix Partners, they got target to be achieved in the next 2 years. Now they had a good idea, good funding, everything was going right. So why did they fail? Let's analyze that step by step. So, after funding, when they started scaling their model, they saw that students were not much interested in doing industrial tours but wanted to do holiday tours. Now, you may ask, what is this? It's absurd, right? The program was decided to have industrial expertise for the students and not to take them on holidays, right? But as they started doing these industrial tours and industrial workshops, they got the feedback that students wanted to do holiday tours. Not everyone was interested in gaining practical skills and industrial tours. And this is very common. If you analyze your school days or your college days, you must have seen that only 10 to 20% people in your class, in your school, are working hard, studying hard, want to gain skills. Rest 60-80% people are just not interested. They just don't find this stuff interesting. These are people who want to party, want to go on holiday tours. So that is the feedback they got. And along with that, they noticed that in a class of 100 students, only 10 to 15 students used to enroll for such industrial programs. Despite the cost was cheap, only 10 to 15 students used to enroll. So this was a problem that they were solving was for a small market. This is what affected them badly. Now, what happened is, as you remember, as I told you, investors gave them a target, a huge target of 30 crores to be achieved in next 2 years. And due to this target, under the pressure of investors, they diverted from their vision and started doing holiday tours for students instead of industrial tours. Now, this is again absurd. A startup was solving one problem, and just because investors had given you a certain target, they went on to solve another thing. They literally entered into another industry. So this is just ridiculous, guys. Don't do this. Don't change your vision. I mean, how would a startup survive if you change your vision completely? So this is what happened with them. This was the starting point of their failure. Later, it meant that you were competing with travel agents. Obviously, since you entered into the tours and travel industry, now you had to compete with the travel agents. And these travel agents had one major advantage. Since they were in industry, they had a huge network of hotels and they used to buy tickets and inventory in bulk. Due to this, Purple Squirrel could not compete with them as they did not have volume of students to take them to holiday tours. And so Purple Squirrels had to burn its own cash. They had to literally burn their own cash. Why so? Because they entered into new industry and they had to compete with giant players, established players in that new industry. So the funding was getting exhausted, but there was no much revenue. And since they were not generating much revenue, investors lowered the sales target to 15 crore. Earlier, they gave them a target of 30 crore to be achieved in 2 years, but now they gave them the target of 15 crore, which was to be achieved. And this was something pressure that they had to do. They had to cope up with this pressure, or else they would not be able to raise the next round of funding. Because the thing is, once you change your vision, getting new investor on board is very difficult. And now they had to rely on matrix partners, that is their existing investors, to raise the next round of fund. And so they had to complete their sales target. This is the reason that why they failed. Finally, after end of 2 years, they were only able to make a revenue of 5 crore. And so investors did not fund them. It was obvious. As investors told them that they had to make this huge revenue of 15 crore. But they did not make that revenue, and so investors did not fund them, which was very obvious, right? Now, before the company ended, that is before it shut down, they had funds of 2 crore left in their account, and this was fund that was sufficient only for 3 months for the company to survive. And so they laid off their 40 employees just for the sake of cost cutting. And that is what we see, right? If a startup has flawed business model, if a startup is not working great, what these companies do, they have only one solution: lay off the employees to cut the cost. They are not competent enough to earn profits, and so they just lay off employees and play with people's lives. So then what happens is one more major shift comes into their model. They realize their mistake, that they had changed their vision And so they again decided to work on their initial vision, which was, giving industrial experience to college students. But now it was too late. And also they, were able to raise funds of 2 crore after approaching like 50 to 60 investors. But now the new problem arose. Now, what was the problem? Obviously, you have a certain cost, right? You have your employees, your operational cost, your office cost, etc. But the thing is, students were not ready to go on tours in the last 2 to 3 months before exams. And so scalability was problem. Why was that? Because in these 2 3 months, they had zero business. Because literally no student wanted to go on industrial tours before their exams. They want to ace their exams, prepare for their exams. Even the non-serious ones want to prepare for their exams. So these 2 3 months were the months of zero business, but at the same time, in these 2 3 months, they had to pay all different types of cost. So this was something that, hamper their scalability. Finally, the startup failed in 2015, that is only in 2 years. So this was the sad story of Purple Squirrel. This was a story of, startup failure that happened due to pivot of business model and due to investor pressure. So let's now have some learnings for you. Whenever you raise funds, make sure you have a supportive investor instead of investor who gives you unreasonable targets. Now, this is a very important point for you to understand. We saw that Purple Squirrel was doing literally great. They made a revenue of 3 crore, of which the company was profitable. They had healthy 20% profit margin, but still they failed. And that was because due to the entry of investors, because investors pressured them to achieve a certain target, and that is why they had to change their vision and change their business model. So what am I telling to you? I will tell you something interesting. Whenever you are starting out on your journey as an entrepreneur and need funding, go to angel investors instead of VCs. Now, why so? Let me explain you. Angel investor is a single investor, and they are generally kind. Okay, they don't micromanage you. They don't take your daily updates on what you're doing and what you're not doing and how much revenue you have to it, etc. They give you freedom to run your own startup. Whereas in case of VCs, that is a huge fund where the job of VC is to generate money. Okay, VCs are not some other type of people. They are just normal people who is a group of people who have funds, and VC is the entity that manages the funds of those high net individuals. So basically, it's the job of VCs to give the return to the people from whom they have taken the money. Since VCs are under pressure to generate a huge revenue, to generate a huge return from startups, they pressure you as a startup because their returns are going to come from you. And that is not the case with angel investors. So make sure when you're starting out, when you raise your seed round or till series A round, go with angel investors. After that series A round, that is from series B, series C, etc., then you can go to VCs, because then the pressure will be less as you have proved your credibility. You have proved that you have a business. So this is an important point for you to keep in mind. The second learning I want to give you is you can change the way to solve a problem, but changing your vision completely will mostly cause a failure. Purple Squirrel was a classic example of pivot gone wrong. So, what is a pivot? Pivot is basically changing the business entirely, entering into new industry and working on something new or introducing new products. That is what we call pivot in startup. Here, what happened is Purple Squirrel got diverted from its vision. And remember this, 99% of startups, in fact, it would not be an exaggeration to say that 100% of startups who change their vision are bound to fail. You are surely going to fail if you are going to change your vision entirely. They went from solving a problem and then they went to solve another problem, and those two problems had no link. They literally changed their vision. So make sure in your startup journey you don't change your vision. Okay, so these were the key learnings from this case study. I hope you learned something valuable. See you in the next one.